In this video, we're going to talk about wholesaling exit strategies and how you can implement them into your real estate investing business in order to make money in real estate. All that and more coming right up. Hey everybody, it's Jamel Gibbs with the REI Education Academy, helping you close deals consistently in your real estate investing business. And on this channel, what we do are real estate investing how-to videos and tutorials, as well as videos of me actually investing in real estate. So if you're new here, consider subscribing. And at any point in this video, if I mention any resources, those resources will be linked in the description box below in case you want to get started with them right away. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump into today's video. Today, what we're going to do is talk about wholesaling exit strategies. There's mainly 5 ways that I implement into my real estate investing business in order to wholesale real estate. And it all depends on the type of deal that comes up. So if it's, let's say, a bank-owned REO deal or an MLS property type of deal, I'm going to use a specific strategy. If I'm working directly with a motivated seller, then that may be another strategy. Or let's just say that the motivated seller or a regular seller is not as motivated as we want them to be, or maybe they're skeptical when it comes to the assignment clause that goes on the contract, then I'm going to use a different type of strategy. So what are these strategies that you can implement in order to wholesale real estate in today's market? The strategies that I'm going to talk about, I've been using them for years. I've actually done videos like this before on YouTube, but I wanted to offer you a refresher so that you know that these strategies are still working in today's market. Now, the first strategy we're going to talk about is the assignment of contract. Now, if you've been around real estate investing or wholesaling for any amount of time, then you know that everybody and their grandma is talking about wholesaling, and they're talking about assigning contracts. Basically, what an assignment of contract is a contract that allows you to sell your equitable interest in a property to another investor. So let's just say, for example, you were to pick up a property for $60,000 and you wanted to make a $10,000 assignment fee. What you can do, as long as you have the right clause, which is and/or assigns, in your contract with the seller, you can then go ahead and assign that contract. You can assign your equitable interest off to another buyer on the other end. And that's called an assignment of contract for a profit. It works with motivated sellers. It works with people who are looking to get out of their properties. It doesn't necessarily work on the MLS properties. I've been around the business for a long time. I haven't seen anybody have the ability to assign an MLS property. And if you put that clause and/or assigns on a regular state legal contract with a realtor, they're probably not going to want to do the deal with you. So you want to be mindful. You want to be sure that you don't add that to the contract. Now, let's just say, for example, you do come across an MLS property or a bank-owned REO property. What you can do, there's several different ways to close that type of transaction in order to make a wholesale deal work. So the first thing that you can do is called a wet closing. All right, now what in the world is a wet closing? So basically what that means is you're bringing liquid funds to the table. You get it? Liquid, wet, kind of goes hand in hand, right? So what you're doing is you're bringing liquid funds to the table. Typically, they call it transactional funding these days. All right, so what that basically means is you're going to borrow money or use your own capital, and you're going to physically close that deal with your funds or someone else's funds. You're going to pay them a fee for the money or pay yourself, however you decide to make that work. And then you're going to do a double close. You're going to sell the property the same day to your end buyer. That's called a wet closing. There's also something called a dry closing, and we've had success doing this as well. The difference is a lot of attorneys are not comfortable doing this type of deal. So you're going to have to talk to your attorney to see if they're comfortable doing a dry close. Now, basically what a dry close means is you're not bringing liquid funds to the table. What you're going to do is close with your buyer first. So you're going to do what's called a B2C closing first, between you and your buyer first. Then you're going to do the A to B closing between you and your seller. Okay, so you're going to have a B2C closing between you and your buyer, and then an A to B closing after that between you and your seller. The difference also with the wet closing is you can do the A to B first and then the B to C closing on the wet close. With the dry close, you have the B to C first, then the A to B. And the reason you do the B to C first is because your buyer is bringing the cash to the table. Your attorney is basically gonna hold off on recording the B to C closing. They're gonna take the funds from your buyer, and then when you close the A to B closing, the funds from the B to C is actually going to fund the transaction between the A to B, which is you and the seller. I hope I didn't confuse you there. So again, just to put that into simpler terms, basically with a dry close, your attorney is going to close the transaction between you and your end buyer first. Then they're gonna take the money from the buyer to fund the transaction between you and your seller, all right? Just to keep it simple. So we've discussed the assignment of agreement of sale, we've discussed the dry closing, and we've also discussed the wet closing as well. Now here's some more creative ways in order to close transactions, and these work really well for me when it comes to MLS properties or maybe bank-owned REO type of deals or sellers that will give you a hard time. You have the LLC strategy and you have the land trust strategy as well. Now, when it comes to wholesaling real estate through an LLC, all you're gonna do is sign a contract with, let's say, a realtor for a bank-owned property or an MLS type of property, or a motivated seller that's giving you a hard time because they don't like the and/or assigns because other wholesalers just messed it up for you. You're gonna do what's called the LLC strategy, and you're gonna set up an LLC with your state. I know here in North Carolina, it costs $125. When I was in Pennsylvania, it would cost me $50. So whatever the fee amount is for you to set up an LLC in your state is what it is. So you have to figure that out and just understand that it will cost a little bit of money to set up the company. Then what you're gonna do is add that LLC onto the contract. Now, the tricky part is knowing what your LLC name is going to be. What I like to do is use the property address. So let's just say I'm purchasing 123 Main Street. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add 123 Main Street LLC onto the contract, and then I'm gonna go ahead and set up the LLC online at the Department of State, all right? And then once I do that, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to take control of the property through the LLC, and now I'm in control of the LLC because I'm the owner of the LLC. I set up the LLC, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and find a buyer who's willing to purchase the LLC from me. So technically you can't wholesale bank-owned properties through an assignment of agreement. You can't wholesale certain properties. You can wholesale MLS properties if they're a private seller, but a lot of realtors frown upon that. So the next best thing is to set up an LLC and sell the LLC. If it's a bank-owned property, guess what? Technically, you're not selling the property or the contract that you have on the property. What you're doing is you're selling the business that tied the property up. So let's just say you want to make $10,000 on the deal. You sell your company for $10,000. And now your end buyer, as long as they're okay with it and taking on the tax ramifications and things like that, they can now control the agreement that you have on that property and be able to close the deal for you. And finally, again, you have the land trust, one of my favorite ways to tie up properties, especially if I'm holding on to properties long term. It doesn't cost anything to set it up as long as you have the right agreement, and you can talk to an attorney, or you can set up the land trust yourself, okay? The beautiful thing about having a land trust is you can literally create the document and tell your attorney that you have a land trust set up. The attorney never has to see the agreement. And in addition to that, it allows you a lot of privacy and protection on your deal. All right, now, when it comes to the land trust, all you're gonna do is set up the land trust, put the documents in your file cabinet, and then tie up your property, whether it's bank owned or it's, let's say, an MLS property with a realtor and they don't want you to add and or assigns to the agreement. You use the land trust and you just put 123 trust, or whatever the property address is, 123 trust on the agreement. And then when you go out and you find your buyer, you're gonna do what's called an assignment of beneficiary rights from the trust over to your end buyer for a profit. Now on the trust, what you wanna do is you make yourself the beneficiary of the trust, and you make your LLC, your company that you've set up, the personal representative of the trust. So that way you're protected on all levels. I even do that when I'm purchasing rental properties to hold on to long term. I set up a trust, and then I go ahead and I make my LLC the personal representative of the trust. And then what I do is I make myself the beneficiary of that trust along with my wife and kids. All right, but in this case, you don't necessarily have to do all of that if your end goal is to wholesale the property. So what you do is you assign your beneficiary rights in that trust over to your end buyer for a profit. So let's just say you want to make 10 grand again, then you're basically assigning your rights in the trust, not the property. You're assigning your rights in that trust over to your end buyer. So again, just to recap, you have the regular assignment of agreement of sale. You have your wet clothes and your dry clothes. You can sell your LLC, or you can assign your beneficiary rights in a trust in order to wholesale real estate and be profitable in today's market. Be sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell for future videos just like this one. We release them every week. Talk to you later. Take care.